Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network's BRN Sunday podcast. I'm Jeff Snyder, your host, and this is the place where members of the media, academia, and financial services analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more. We've got another great show for you today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. We're going to kick things off this week with a look at technology, and joining me on the line from West Palm Beach, Florida, Mr. Daniel Klein. He's Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Hi, Dan. How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I guess you don't have to ask where I am.
No.
It's kind of obvious.
No, and we joke about it, but you've been usually are the traveling to conferences and obviously doing things on the weekend with the family and cruises and whatnot. So I'm sure this is quite a change for you.
It's a little frustrating, but I'm very lucky that to be in an industry that's busier than usual.
Yeah.
So as much as I can complain, I'm working more than ever, and getting to help our members sort of navigate through this has been very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And people can certainly follow Dan's work. And I don't do enough to promote Dan's great work, but you can definitely go to the Motley Fool, right, Dan? You've got an author page, and people can see your work as well as your colleagues' work as well on the Fool, motleyfool.com.
I do, and we've really tried to be a calming voice in the storm, really talking about the history of market drops and that they eventually come back, and sort of how to evaluate companies during this. And frankly, you learn a lot about leadership with how they're treating workers during this. In some cases that means laying them off so they can take the best advantage of benefits.
Yeah.
In other cases, it means keeping them on because there's still an ability to serve people.
Yeah.
So just because a company laid people off, that might be the smart move to preserve cash so they can go back to operations, because there is the $2 trillion stimulus plan that does provide enhanced unemployment that will help an awful lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So people should definitely check that out, as well as many of our contributors are doing a lot of work and are very busy these days, and we thank them so much for coming on the program. So Dan, let's talk tech, and I really wanted to jump in with you about online grocery services, because you and I have talked about this over the years, very popular. But I can tell you just from personal experience, my wife and I and the cats live in the tri-state area, as many of the listeners know. Very difficult right now for us to shop online, so we've making food runs to the local grocery store where we can. So why don't you weigh in on this and give us your perspective?
Yeah, it's absolutely challenging in some parts of the country. And what I would say is, if you live in an area where you can't get an Instacart delivery for 2 weeks, take that delivery.
Yeah.
Because what you can do is, you might have to go to a store. And obviously, if you go to a store, take all precautions, social distance. It's suggested you wear a mask, which is largely to protect others from you in case you sneeze or spit or who knows what. But if you get that delivery slot 2 weeks out, you can add items to it right up until about the day of delivery. So here in West Palm Beach, we haven't had that trouble with getting a slot, but it is still backed up a few days. So if I get an order on a Saturday, what I do is I immediately place my next order and I space it out for about a week. And I'll add a few things that I know I'm going to need to get to that $35 minimum so you can place an order. I'll point out I am an Instacart member. And so I'll get my milk and some chicken and a couple of things. And I've had really good success with getting almost everything I need. There's still no hand sanitizer. There's still, you might get a slightly different variety of paper towels than what you were looking for. The other one is Amazon Prime, where I know or Whole Foods, where you've had trouble getting a slot. That's a really tricky one because they release slots throughout the day. So the trick there that's worked for me is you place your order, you build your order, and then you go into the screen that says there's no slots, check back later. And if you toggle back to the previous screen and keep going back and forth, at least in my experience, sometimes a slot pops up. So that is non-scientific. It's only been tested by me, but it generally works. The other thing is I've seen so many overkill posts. People are getting online, groceries dropped at their door, and then they're leaving them in the garage for 24 hours or spraying them with Lysol. You don't need to do that. The World Health Organization recommendations say it's very unlikely that packaging would be affected, especially if it's something you're going to cook. Now, if you ordered, say, a prepared salad takeout, there is a slight risk if the chef was ill and not taking proper precautions that something could be wrong, but you can't Lysol your salad. So there is no reason to overly worry. Obviously, bring your bags in. Don't have the person leave it at the door. Don't have any interaction with him, or her. But don't sort of fall into this paranoia. And if you have to go to a store, realize that if you take the proper precautions, you're generally fine. Wash your hands after you handle whatever you bring inside. Wash your hands before you prepare food. Even when we don't have a coronavirus pandemic, wash your hands when you prepare food. This is not difficult advice. And I know it's scary, but spraying a bunch of Lysol on all your grocery bags is not a great idea.
Yeah, that sounds very anti and the antithesis of what you should be doing. Dan, so these online services obviously becoming very popular for obvious reasons. Do you see these companies ramping up or staffing up? And there are challenges obviously with doing that given what's going on, the social distancing, the pandemic, health concerns, monetary concerns. But do you see them? I mean, we're in the first 20 days, right, where we've all been told don't go out, right? So this is like 20 days. How a company cannot prepare in 20 days and ramp up. So will we anticipate that this happens over time?
Yeah, it's happening now. So Amazon is hiring 100,000 people. It's trying to entice workers from other areas of its warehouse to move into the grocery area. Instacart is hiring, I want to say 150,000. It's a lot of people. I might be overstating or understating that number. And the challenge is, they're using a lot of rapid hire digital methods, but obviously they're also implementing temperature checks and other things. Include Walmart in this fray because they have delivery and curbside pickup. Target has delivery, though not for fresh grocery, and curbside pickup in many markets. All of these people are hiring. Many of them have made deals. I'm about to write a story about Sodexo, the food services company, that some of its operations are shut down. They're on college campuses, they're in stadiums, they're all sorts of places. They're working with Kroger and PepsiCo and other companies to place their workers temporarily in jobs. Starbucks is keeping its drive-through open. A lot of places are keeping their drive-through open and are hiring. Domino's is hiring, thousands of people. Papa John's, a terrible company that makes terrible pizza, is hiring is hiring 20,000 people. Well, you can't run a commercial saying better ingredients, better pizza when the only pizza it's better than is the worst pizza you can get frozen.
Okay.
Like, it's one of my pet peeves as a company. It's like you want to say okay pizza fast. Well, all right, that's fine. But like you cannot anyone who's had a pizza knows it's not very good, but it is available. So you can get it and they're hiring. So if you're out of work, there are lots of jobs. Obviously you have to look at what you would collect via unemployment with the enhanced unemployment and if it makes sense for you to go to work, if you might get called back quickly. But if you're going to come out even and you just want to be part of the solution, there are a lot of jobs out there for people who want to help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dan, I want to shift gears. A lot of folks are home, right? And streaming, I got to think, is just like the number one pastime. I think we covered this on the network Tuesday, maybe. It's all starting to run together. But you and I talked about this. So streaming is becoming the new national pastime. Forget baseball, forget football, forget golf. This is the new national pastime. Why don't you give us some tips on streaming and streaming services and what is hot, what is not?
Yeah, so a lot of streaming services are offering free trials. Even some things like HBO isn't as much offering free access to everything, but they've put some movies and TV shows out there. Something like CBS All Access, which is like kind of a fifth tier streaming service. But it has a few shows you might want to watch. You might want to watch some of the Star Trek shows, the new Picard show. Maybe you want to watch the reboot of Twilight Zone. Well, now is a time you can go in, binge them for free, and just remember if you sign up someplace that asks for a credit card, to cancel your subscription on time. They're not pushing it now, but like WWE Network is free for a month. So if you'd like to watch WrestleMania this weekend, which was taped with no audience and is going to be very strange, you can sign up. Again, just remember to cancel. Things that aren't free, like Netflix and Disney Plus, seem like an incredible value right now. If you're not a Netflix subscriber, you could pick up Netflix for the next month and pretty much never have to move your head. You know, there's an awful lot. If you've never had Netflix, forgetting just the original shows they've created, and I recommend you go through the Marvel shows. I mean, they all ended abruptly, unfortunately, but they're really good. Daredevil and Jessica Jones and the Defenders and a couple others in there. But you could go and you could tell I'm a superhero guy. All of the CW Arrowverse shows are in there. Those aren't Netflix created. Those are shows maybe you thought were for kids. They're really not. They're really dramatic adult shows. There's also hundreds of comedy specials, archival ones and newer ones. If you like true crime, there's an endless amount. Now, if you have a family and you're stuck at home, Disney Plus, I would recommend. It's a crime if your kids haven't seen every episode of The Simpsons. I feel like this should be a semester of school where you actually just sit and watch The Simpsons. So if you're going to homeschool, I would suggest you start with season one. It starts a little slow. The animation is a little crude at first, and it builds very quickly into what I would argue is by far the best comedy series of all time. So there's a lot for you to watch out there. A lot of the sports networks, because they don't have live games to show, are offering access to archival stuff. So if you want to go back and watch, the Rangers run to the Cup in '94, you can probably do that. There's all sorts of stuff out there, and now is time to take advantage of it.
Dan, we have talked, you and I and Natalie Walters, your former colleague at the Motley Fool, have talked about the billions of dollars being spent by these companies to produce content. What you mentioned a disruption when it comes to, and by the way, you are my comic book superhero when it comes to tech. So you're the tech superhero. But what does it mean for disruption for content creation? We had this, wouldn't The Mandalorian, as an example, which is a show that I watch, or some of these other shows be disrupted because everything else is disrupted in terms of producing new content? Are we going to have cliffhangers that don't maybe get answered for longer, prolonged periods of time?
So there are a few shows that were in the process of completing a season that are going to come back with mini seasons next year. I want to say it's called Legacies on CW. I think it's a vampire show. I'm not even sure. But there's a few shows that had announced final seasons, and they either had already shot the finale, so it's not a problem, or what they did is they're going to take maybe 4 or 5 episodes they produced already, and then when they can go back to production, produce the 1 or 2 more they had, and then it'll be sort of a special event. So something like The Mandalorian, which is probably my favorite show of the entire year, an absolutely amazing cinematic production. Instead of it coming back in October, you might see it pushed to mid-November, maybe even a little later than that. But the good thing is there's nothing stopping you from writing television during this. I'm sure there is some level of editing and post-production going on because those are things you can do at your home for the most part if you have the right equipment. So absolutely, we're going to be a month to 2 months, maybe a little longer, delayed in shooting some of these things. So that is going to create a backlog. It might create a fight for resources at some of these things. But I don't think you're going to notice it all that much because you will also have a rush of movies that were held off that are going to get released, and it's going to be difficult to figure out what the schedule for that is. It's also going to be challenging to know what the state of the movie theater is because that was not a great business before this, and it's obviously a business that's absolutely devastated by what's going on right now.
Dan, we've got about a minute left in this segment. Do books make a comeback? I know we've kind of turned the TV off a little bit and read books or read them online or listened to podcasts or listened to audiobooks. Do they make a comeback?
So I'm a big reader, and I've been reading more, though certainly I haven't been reading anything heavy. I'm reading the novelization of the last Star Wars movie, so so not exactly business books or anything too valuable. Look, the day of the physical book, everyone kind of thought was over, and then the reality is it's about 50-50 physical books to digital books, and it's kind of settled there. I actually think this pandemic is going to tip more people into reading digital books. So you'll probably see a slight uptick in reading, maybe a big uptick about amidst people who read anyway. But they're going to be doing that on their phone and maybe a dedicated reading device. I think once you start reading on a newer iPhone, you realize, oh my God, like this is a great experience. It's easier than reading on a book. So I think there might be a slight shift,
Mhm.
but I don't think people who don't read all of a sudden take up reading.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Dan, always a pleasure talking with you, and we're looking forward to having you back on the television network on Tuesday. So until then, stay safe and get those Instacart groceries, and we will talk to you then.
I'll see you then.
Thanks. Bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at the latest social media trends, and who better to do that than Devin Banerjee, CFA. He's a senior financial services editor for LinkedIn, and he's also the editor of the This Week in Finance newsletter, which you can find on the LinkedIn platform. Devin, thanks so much for doing double duty and joining us again on the podcast.
Always happy to be with you, Jeff.
Yeah, well, it's amazing the work that you and the team are doing. Lots going on, and it's not just financial services. I mean, you have editors, you have colleagues that cover healthcare and technology and small business, right? I mean, and you guys have to be completely up to the gills in stories.
Yeah, that's right. And we also have this great vantage point at what people are talking about, what people want to know, what people are reading. So the first item I'm going to highlight this week is a continuation of the conversation we had last week, which is the huge stimulus package that was enacted a week ago, about $2 to $2.2 trillion in relief. So today, which full disclosure, we're recording this on Friday, today the talk is all about, is the money moving, especially with that $350 billion allocation for small businesses. They're the ones really, really struggling with their liquidity and cash flow right now and looking for that aid. And they're kind of clamoring to know how to apply, when to apply, and when that money will move. So the government has authorized a group of lenders, a list of lenders you can find online. These are banks and others that have traditionally worked with the Small Business Administration. And only this morning, Friday, is when some money is starting to move. So Bank of America got its online application up, or its online application portal up around 9 a.m. Eastern time this morning. And so everyone, or a lot of small businesses, began flooding to Bank of America. The CEO, Brian Moynihan, said this morning that they got about 10,000 applications within the first hour. And what we're really seeing right now on both the LinkedIn platform and actually trending on Twitter is a lot of people now quite frustrated at the process. Bank of America is actually just prioritizing pre-existing customers, people who already have borrowed from the bank. And basically they're saying that's just the only way we can process and prioritize the flood of applications right now. The others that were authorized, the other big lenders, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, have yet to, as of this recording, get their application systems up and running. So this is going to be really, really interesting to watch over the course of the weekend. It's going to be a very busy weekend for these banks and their technical teams, as well as, most importantly, for those small business owners and operators who, as I said, are just looking for aid as soon as possible. This is government-approved and government-backed loans. The banks are not taking any risk here. $350 billion. You know, there was so much fanfare around this, if I can say that, the past couple of weeks from the government, from the administration. So these small businesses are looking for it ASAP.
Yeah, I'm not sure that if I was the CEO of Bank of America or any of these other institutions, I'd want to take a phone call from the President of the United States right now. I mean, it didn't seem to work out too well with General Motors, and by no means am I an advocate for a top-down, you know, I don't want the President to bully anyone, but, you know, these seems so what often happens is I think the best laid plans, right, and you get the stimulus, and it's a needed stimulus, and the thought here, and I don't even know how you refer to this in an economic sense, I think, Devin, is like almost like priming the pump. So we want to keep these businesses afloat, right? And so theoretically, you know, the Treasury Secretary work with the Congress, work with the executive, the President, They got this bill passed, and now it's up to the private sector to do their part. And I
Yeah.
think, we shouldn't. I think, with their 30 million small businesses, at least. I was doing some research this morning for our show tomorrow. I'm sitting down with David Musto from Ascensus. He's CEO of Ascensus for a quick interview. And so I was putting in some graphics. But, we don't want these businesses employ people. We need to make sure that they have the proceeds that was earmarked for them. And I don't understand, I guess there's a rhyme and a reason for this, but we want to make sure that the money gets in the right people's hands. And I don't know how you validate. I mean, what's the oversight on this? How do you
Right.
verify, right? I don't know. So I
Yeah,
think that's
all
a
those
concern.
questions, those are the questions the banks are raising as well. Is, hey, are we supposed to do diligence on these borrowers or not? Banks are also wondering if they can sell this debt onto investors, which is their normal business model.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any clarification there. And actually, in my world, there's a really interesting hashtag that began trending, which is Let FinTech Help. If you think about how many FinTech platforms there are that have direct access to people's bank accounts and can process, they're used to moving money. If you think about the PayPals and Venmos and so many others of the world, they're used to moving money quickly and in a digital first manner.
Yep.
So a lot of those fintech entrepreneurs and their investors in the venture capital community are starting that wave of encouragement toward their lawmakers to try to get fintech enabled in this program as well.
Yeah, well, and just to kind of recalibrate my comments, I'm not throwing stones. I think that in any time you have a government program or a program in general with that's this massive, engaging so many people, it's not going to be perfect. And so we need to maybe lower expectations a little bit. I think people are upset. They're going to obviously vent their frustrations, and they may be frustrated for a lot of reasons, Devin. They're home, right? I mean, you can't leave. You're stuck in your house. If you don't have a family and you don't even have pets, you're by yourself pretty much. I can understand the frustration, and let's hope this gets worked out over the weekend, because I agree with you. These small businesses and consumers, consumers and folks need the money ASAP.
Yeah, and they're dealing with so many other issues all at once, as you just said.
Yeah.
So it's really tough. So two more items I'm going to mention. Good weekend reads that we saw really popular, actually, the tail end of last weekend and going into this weekend, both from the Washington Post, coincidentally. The first is one written by management expert Roger Martin, looking at kind of the harsh business lesson of this pandemic. So what Roger is saying is the U.S. economy may be too efficient for its own good. There's been this movement, starting in the 80s and lasting the past few decades, where businesses across the country began to prioritize efficiency. They're reducing slack, reducing inventory. They're decentralizing production wherever possible. And when we look at that, it's great at cutting costs, but it leaves us with shortages of really key materials like we're seeing right now, masks, ventilators. And so what Roger Martin is saying is in the coming years, it's going to be critical for companies to start balancing that efficiency with resilience and, planning for these types of scenarios, which, yes, are kind of, as people say, long tail scenarios, which means, kind of low probability scenarios, but very high impact scenarios where we will need resources on hand. And we've seen in the U.S. that has not been the case. And Roger is pointing to this big move toward efficiency the past couple of decades that has put us in this situation. So really nice kind of thought-provoking piece if you read the whole thing about just basic business models going forward.
Yeah, I think a lot's going to change. I think we're going to be rethinking. Yeah. I mean, they're already, my wife and I watched the press conference. There's a coronavirus task force press conference, and I think there's going to be a lot of rethinking about, for example, supply chain management in this country, but also where we get, for example, our pharmaceuticals from. A lot of the pharmaceuticals and things are coming from abroad. Is that it's almost like a national security issue in some ways. If you can't get masks and you can't get ventilators and you can't get the malaria drugs and the things that you need, does that really make you secure? Because obviously we're challenged in that regard. So I think there's going to be a lot of things rethought that a lot of our national leaders and our local leaders and our business leaders haven't probably calibrated and thought about. And they'll be doing a lot of that post-crisis.
Absolutely. So much is going to be rethought post-crisis. And that last item I'll mention is another one. Again, a great read from the Washington Post called The Great American Migration, about people right now, at least temporarily, fleeing cities and urban centers, which are hotspots for the virus, and kind of seeking refuge in small towns, rural areas if they have other homes or family. And this is really just showcasing that rise of remote work, which we have seen the past few years, but just accelerated now out of necessity, of course, which is enabled by, internet connectivity, of course, but there are some challenges that, people will be looking to solve going forward with remote work, internet connectivity in rural areas. Healthcare accessibility is another one. But a lot of experts believe that this pandemic will only accelerate that shift to even just quote unquote middle ground areas. So those towns that have, urban amenities, but are less densely populated. So there's so many trends that we've just been seeing the past few years that this crisis has suddenly accelerated.
I agree with you, and my wife and I were talking. We have a lot of time, as I'm sure you and your wife and others have a lot of time to chat about the world and life, and we were saying that I think people will, just like they did in the 2008 recession, they will rethink their lives and where they want to live. I mean, I'm in the New York area, right? I'm surrounded by millions of people. This is an epicenter of what's happening in the country. I think a lot of people will think about where they want to live, what's important to them, because, I guess technically you're not allowed to leave, at least in New York. We're not allowed to leave and go to another state unless you self-quarantine. I don't even know how you police that, by the way. I don't think people, it's not like
Right.
East Germany, right? Do you have your papers? I mean, I don't think, you do have to have some level of approval to go be an essential worker, right, in a lot of these states.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are going to rethink their lives, Devin, and think about what's important and where they want to live. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. And just that effect of accelerating things that were slowly happening. We're seeing that across the board with everything we're talking about. One more I'll just mention is I was talking to some PwC experts the other day, especially, and one who advises businesses on their digital transformation. And so many of them have touted their digital efforts and their technology stack the past couple of years, and suddenly in just the past month, they've been thrown straight into the deep end where every employee is working remotely, the technology is being stressed, and basically if there's one positive or a couple positives coming out of this crisis, on the back end, every company will probably be set up really well digitally just out of necessity.
Yeah, well, this too shall pass. Devin, always a pleasure. I hear you in the backyard. I heard the birds chirping. That must be a lovely sound. I wish I could walk into a backyard. If I could already go into the backyard, I'll fall out of my window. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. And really appreciate you pulling double duty this week. And folks, check out This Week in Finance. It's a great newsletter. Devin and the team wrap everything up. Devin, take care. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care, Jeff. Bye.
Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears to personal finance. And on the line is Ms. Mari Backen. She's a personal finance reporter for The Motley Fool. Hi, Mari. How are you?
Doing okay, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing okay, all things considered. And we were talking before about online grocery shopping, and I was talking to your colleague, Daniel Klein, earlier in the show about some of the travails, the challenges of getting online groceries. Just real difficult right now, Mari, to order online. Just you can't find days.
Yeah, exactly. It's been tough for a lot of people. Jeff, you and I were talking about this just a minute ago. One thing, though, that I think people can try doing, because I know a lot of the big providers like Peapod and FreshDirect, it's been hard to book a slot. I have friends who are staying up till 2, 3 in the morning trying to see if they can get on there and see when slots are released and get one. It's really difficult. What people can try doing, though, because this has worked for us, is try seeing if there are local mom and pop stores or specialty stores or even gourmet stores in your area, because a lot of them are actually letting you call in an order and then you can pick it up curbside. So you drive up, you prepay it, you pop your trunk, you give your name, someone puts your grocery bags in your trunk, closes your trunk, you drive away.
Yeah.
And in terms of contact, it's pretty much the same as getting a delivery. So a little bit of a safer way to shop, I think, if that's available to you.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion and kind of mirrors in some ways what Daniel, your colleague Daniel Klein, was saying. So Mari, you're a personal finance reporter. This is really trying times for so many Americans, and I know you wanted to talk about the stimulus checks, a little bit more about that. You've done a lot of digging, a lot of research, thought that through. What are you telling readers and listeners?
So there is a stimulus package that's been approved to the tune of $2 trillion, actually, and it's designed to help small businesses among other entities. But if you are I'll call it a moderate or even a high earner, but not too high an earner, you should have a $1,200 payment coming your way. So let's talk for a minute about who's getting this stimulus payment. So it's $1,200 per adult and $500 per qualifying child, but to be eligible, there are income thresholds involved. Mm-hmm. So now the thresholds depend on your tax filing status. If you're single and you earn up to $75,000, and by earn, I'm talking about your adjusted gross income as reported on your last tax return. If you earn up to $75,000 and you are single, you will get $1,200. But from there, the stimulus actually starts to phase out. It's actually reduced by $5 for each $100 of income above that limit. So that basically, in a nutshell, if you make $99,000 as a single tax filer, you're not getting a stimulus. But you'll get the full stimulus below or at 75. It'll start to phase out above 75, and then it's knocked away at 99. But that said, there's some wiggle room with that if you have a child or two in the mix. But if you're single and you have no children, 99,000 is the threshold. You're not getting a stimulus above that point. And then for married couples filing jointly, those limits are 150,000 and then 198. So basically, if your adjusted gross income is $150,000 or less, you're getting a full $1,200 per adult. If you're married, they don't screw you over and say, here's $1,200 for the two of you. So you're
that's good news.
It's a per adult payment, but once you start earning above 150, it starts to phase out. So that basically, unless your income is under 198,000, you're not getting anything. And then again, there's a little wiggle room to earn a little bit more, depending on if you have children in the mix. So Jeff, the good news is that this is a pretty generous income range, right? To basically get a full stimulus, let's say, for up to 75,000 in income, and to, effectively get something as long as you don't earn, 99 or more. That's not a bad package, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the goal here was to target employees who really needed, or individuals that really needed this money. Certainly if you make a lot of money, you probably don't, even if you lost your job, you should have some savings, and you still have the ability to do that. And in addition, Mari, many Americans, I think over 10 million Americans over the last 2 weeks, have filed for unemployment benefits as well. So when you look and put all this stuff side by side, you have these stimulus bills, right? And then some people can file for unemployment, get unemployment. And again, it's a patchwork quilt of things. It's not going to replace all your income, but it just kind of gets you through while this economy is shut down, I guess, is the purpose.
Right. And I'm not saying the following to in any way make light of the situation, but rather just to give hope to people. When you actually take a look at the full picture of what's being offered, some people may not be in as dire shape as maybe they thought they were initially. So if you're unemployed, for example, so right now, because of the new, stimulus plan, basically unemployment benefits are being padded by $600 a week. So you're going to get a higher unemployment benefit. You're going to get a stimulus. There's an extension of unemployment so that if you're out of work longer than expected, you can still collect some benefits. And there's a lot of relief out there in terms of being able to defer your mortgage, hold off on utility, payments, things like that. There's pausing auto loans or other loan payments. There's a lot of relief out there. So again, this is, not to be too sunshiny about it, because obviously if you, lost your job and you're sitting there flipping out, wondering what you're going to do for money, obviously it's not a great spot to be in. But my message is don't panic, because there is relief coming your way. You're going to be given more time to pay certain bills. You're going to, if your income is within the thresholds we talked about, you're going to get a $1,200 stimulus payment probably within the next 3 to 6 weeks. And, and then again, there's unemployment. A lot of online systems are really jammed right now. People are having trouble filing claims, but eventually you'll be able to get through. You'll be able to file for those benefits, and you'll get some decent money coming in there too. And another thing, Jeff, is that normally self-employed or gig workers are not eligible for unemployment benefits, and actually now they are because of this situation.
Wow.
If you're self-employed, you can collect benefits, and basically you'll get the $600 plus 50% of your state's, I forget if it's average or median benefit. I want to say average. Don't quote me on that, because I'm talking off the top of my head, and it may be median,
Sure.
but I think it's average. So basically, if the average weekly unemployment benefit in your state is $300, so you'd get $150 plus the $600 boost. So actually, a lot of people really are being taken care of through this ordeal.
And so last question for the segment, because I want to talk about home care a little bit and what that's like from your perspective. But how do you subscribe for that? Do you have to do anything as a gig worker? Where do you do that? And secondly, you talked about timing, but do I need anything else to do for getting the stimulus check? Will they mail me a check? Will they direct deposit? How is that going to work?
That's an important question. So basically, they're going to take the information that's on file from your most recent tax return. So if that's 2018, that's fine. If you already filed your 2019 taxes, they're going to use that information. And so basically, if you signed up for direct deposit or the IRS has your bank account details on file, because a lot of people, when they get refunds, they sign up for direct deposit, you do not have to take action at all, because basically the Treasury will just take that address and directly deposit your stimulus payment directly into that bank account.
Okay. That's good. That's really good to know. Okay, Mari, I want to put aside the personal finance aspect, and I want to talk to you as a mom and also part of a family of children. How has the caretaking, managing, and you work from home, but now you have your husband home, the kids are not going to school. How is that juggling going? I think many Americans are dealing with this, and how are you managing?
Yeah, it's funny, Jeff. It's a mixed bag, because I have a lot of friends who are saying to me, gosh, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but part of me wishes I just got laid off right now, because then I could collect unemployment and I wouldn't have to deal with the stress of somehow trying to work 40 hours a week and also homeschooling my children and, dealing with this situation. So, I came into this at an advantage only because, as you said, I work from home. I always work from home. I've worked from home for many, many years. So at least I'm used to that routine, and I know how to be productive in my home environment. What I'm not used to is having little children around the entire day while I'm trying to get stuff done. And the added challenge with the homeschooling is that, some of the stuff they can do independently, but some of it they can't. So you also have to take time out of your day to go and sit and, make sure you're guiding your kids so that they're able to do what they need to do. So it's challenging. One of the things that helps me, though, is basically every day, start of the day, I'm an early riser. I sit down with my husband, who's also an early riser. We go over our schedule. We say, okay, what meetings do you have? What calls do you have? When are you really not available? And when do you need quiet? And when do you need to not be disturbed? And that way we're able to sort of work around each other's schedule to say, okay, well, I'll say, well, my husband, he's got meetings on Thursday from 10 to 12. So I guess I'm on kid duty, and I know that I'm not really going to get that much done between 10 and 12 because I'm going to be interrupted with requests for snacks or help with some online school. So I sort of just plan for that. And then on the flip side, if he's got maybe a window of time, let's say from 2 to 4 in the afternoon where he doesn't have a meeting, all right, then it's his turn, and then I get to sit and really focus and power through some stuff, and then he's got to step up. So, we're pretty lucky in that we happen to have a legitimate home office equipped with everything we need, desks and good computers and a good setup, because I do work from home. And there's two of us. So, so I've got that support system. If you're a single parent trying to manage working from home and your kids, it's a lot more difficult. But I think that the one thing that's really helped me a lot is just try to set a schedule so you can figure out when you're working, when you're going to do your tasks that require the most concentration, and then kind of figure out when you need to throw your hands up in the air and say, okay, these are the times I'm not going to be working. You've got to take a break and feed your kids lunch. So probably whether it's 11:30, 12, 12:31, sometime around the middle of the day, you're going to have to just step away from what you're doing and take the 20, 30, 40 minutes, however long it takes to feed your kids. So for me, it's just easier to figure out what time I'm going to do that. And usually, my kids are flexible, so if I've got a meeting till 12:15 or 12:30, their lunch could be at 12:45. It's not like they have to eat on a preset schedule. So I would just say scheduling. Try to just schedule, just to not to make this situation more difficult and more rigid, but just so that you as a working parent can say, all right, these are the times I know I'm going to get some work done. These are the times I know I'm not going to get some work done. And it just helps you kind of, make better use of your time. The other thing, Jeff, that I would say is, I think I would like to think that employers are being pretty sympathetic right now, recognizing the fact that, a lot of people are juggling, working from home and also having children at home. I remember, when did this all start? Because I'm losing my days. A couple of weeks ago, it was maybe one of the first days that my husband had to take a conference call from home with the kids home. And I remember him kind of getting a little antsy, trying to shush the kids, looking at me with pleading eyes, please, hon, keep the kids quiet, I'm on a call. And, that was maybe like day 1 or 2. And now that we're in I've lost track, maybe 15 or so of this routine where we're doing our work days from home. At this point, the kids could run into his office screaming his name when he's in the middle of a sentence, and he doesn't bat an eyelash. It's fine. So I think just everyone's getting very used to this. I don't want to say the new normal, but our current normal, which is, we're not going to necessarily be as productive as we once were. Sure, if you're single or you're a married couple without kids and you have a job that, lends easily to being done remotely, then sure, you might maintain your productivity. That's great. But let's also remember that even people who are working from home without kids, they may not be used to working from home. They may not have all the tools they need to do so successfully. They may live in a studio apartment so that they're effectively setting up their laptop on their bed. And there's also a global health crisis. So a lot of people have a lot on their minds, and it's hard to not turn on the news, and it's hard to not spend some time checking in with family, and it takes 72 minutes to try to go online and schedule a pickup or delivery spot for groceries. So I think another takeaway here is just really, no matter what your situation is, you may not be as productive as you normally would be on the job in the next, bunch of weeks. And I think we all have to sort of make our peace with that. I know a lot of employers are cutting slack, and I think we all need to be a little kinder to ourselves right now too, and say, well, we're doing the best job we can work-wise, And I'll tell you that for me, Jeff. I submitted an article just a couple of days ago, and it was an article about losing sleep over COVID-19, and I submitted it, and then a couple of hours later or so, I looked at it, and I was like, it just happened to still be up on my screen, and I looked at it, and I quickly sent a note to my editor saying, you'll notice that I titled this article "Losing Sleeping Over COVID-19." Clearly, I'm losing sleeping myself, because that's clearly not English, and I happened to catch the mistake. But point being, I'm sure had I not caught my own mistake, any editor who looked at that would have laughed and said, "Okay, she's clearly, she clearly just didn't catch it. She's got a lot going on. Maybe she is sleep deprived, and we all are these days." So, I think we're gonna maybe make some mistakes in our work. We're gonna maybe not be as productive as we normally would be, and I think as long as we're trying our best, I think that has to just be okay.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's about I think patience, and the tendency is to get on each other's nerves. Especially if you're in a smaller space, you're all confined. We can't go out. If you have a yard, that's great. You can go for a walk. Try to go for a walk, but it is challenging right now. So, but I think
one final piece of
yeah,
advice
sure.
that I really want to give parents, though, I mean, people who are trying to work from home with kids, I'm fortunate in that I do live in the suburbs and I do have a yard that we can, have the kids run around in. We have a large driveway that they can, play games in. We do chalk, drawings and this and that. I highly recommend, even if the weather's not so favorable, trying to get your kids out in the middle of the day every day. We had a rainy spell a few days back, and I put my kids in their jackets and I put their hoods up and I said, come on, guys, 20 minutes outdoors, no one's going to melt, I find that not only is that fresh air really important to me and to the kids, but I think there's something about physically like moving around and getting just a little bit of a change of environment, not being in the home, that sort of recharges my kids. I've got 3 kids ranging from 5 years old up to 8 years old. So obviously, this doesn't necessarily apply to, infants, or maybe older kids will be a little bit different. But I know that for me, there's something about getting out in the middle of the day. It just it puts my kids in this better frame of mind. And it's also such a nice distraction that when we then come back in the house after we've been outdoors, they know that I've spent that time with them and they know that they've gotten to do something different. And then they're usually able to go off and entertain themselves for like quite a bit of time after that.
Right.
Maybe they're tired from running around, So to me, taking that hour out in the middle of the day, I mean, if it's cold and rainy, it's only going to be 15, 20 minutes. If it's a nice day, we'll do an hour or maybe a little bit more. But for me, taking that time, yes, it's an investment because I'm not getting work done, but it pays dividends, Jeff. It does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great advice, and really appreciate you putting on 2 different hats. I think sharing your experience, people can learn from that. I'm really interested to hear about the stimulus check. So let's see how it all works out. Mari, appreciate your time. Stay safe. Enjoy your family, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Sounds good, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Welcome back, and we are now going to talk about student loans, and there was some information in these recent stimulus bills, and who better to talk about this than Betsy Mayotte. She's the president and founder of the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, and of course she's joining us from her home in Massachusetts. Hi, Betsy. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
All things considered, we're doing okay. Putting our doing what we can. We know that there are other people working on the front lines to help out our fellow Americans. So we're trying to do our part by staying home. So thanks so much for joining us. And there's a lot happening, and you're right at the forefront of this because your business is advising folks, people about student loans. So let's just dive right in. What can you tell us? We had the CARES package, we had stimulus packages. What's going on in the realm of student loans these days?
Lots. I'm really happy to see what they have done to help consumers with at least this one bill. I've been in this industry since the earth cooled. I've been through 9/11, Katrina, other really big disasters, and I've never seen relief provided to consumers, and especially so quickly as I am here. So I'm for the most part, I'm pleased, and I'll be the Debbie Downer in a few minutes. But
Okay.
For 75% of the 44 million federal student loan borrowers out there, if it hasn't happened already within the next, say, week or so, your account is going to show no payments due through September 30th, and even better, you're going to have a 0% interest rate. So that's for like 75% of federal student loan borrowers. And you don't have to do a thing. You don't have to call. You don't have to cancel your auto pay. All that stuff is going to be done for you. So that, I think, is a big relief. Now, if you're not economically impacted by the pandemic, you can still continue paying, and you still get the benefit of the 0% interest rate and not actually having a payment due. So I think that's a quick action that can really have impact on households. even if they just want to build up their take the money and build up their emergency fund a little bit more, because we don't know how long this is going to last and what the long-term economic impact is going to be. Now, for those, 25% of federal student loan borrowers that aren't eligible for these waivers, there are other options. There's something called a disaster forbearance, and that's been in place forever. That's usually our go-to when things like this happen. So if you contact your loan holder and tell them you've been economically impacted, you can ask for this 90-day disaster forbearance. Now, you will still accrue interest. So, if you can afford to maybe lower your payment instead of putting it on hold altogether, you should ask about lower payment options such as income-based repayment or unemployment deferments or so on.
Yeah, that's a great step, and I think it's amazing. What has been the reaction from your clientele? Because you're talking to the people who had these loans, right? I mean, you're advising these folks. That's the nature of your business. You're not for profit. So what are people telling you? Are they feeling relieved? Are they still stressed? I mean, they might have financial stresses, but are they feeling relieved about this little piece?
I feel like right now they're going through like the 6 stages of pandemic uncertainty. So,
okay.
I mean, we had a lot of information come out within a very short amount of time, and some of it appeared conflicting because, of course, the first set of waivers that we heard about was on March 13th when the president announced that, people could put loans on hold for 60 days and they'd get a 0% interest rate for 60 days. And this, the Department of Education and the loan servicers didn't really have any more notice than we did that this was going to happen. So they were sort of scrambling. It takes a minute to change 44 million student loan accounts, right? So they were getting that in place. And then, on the 27th, the CARES Act passed. And that was the same but different, 0% interest rate, but for 6 months instead of 60 days, and automatic instead of having to ask for it. So I think borrowers were cautiously optimistic, but there was some anxiety, what do I need to do to get this? Do I need to call? If I'm pursuing public service loan forgiveness, will this screw things up for me? So now I think as the Department of Ed has started to issue additional guidance, people are starting to feel a little more relieved. But, the overall feeling is this is great. This really helps me. I'm going to be able to, target that extra money toward other things that we need in the household, like groceries or paying the rent or paying the mortgage. So, I think the overall feeling is starting to become that relief.
Yeah, and I think that's, what I've learned over the last couple of weeks in interviewing different people is that, our show is about retirement and saving for the future. People are not even thinking about even 30 days from now. They're thinking about right now, keeping their families safe, number one, but also keeping a roof over their heads, providing food, comfort, shelter, all those things that are important. And that really has, alleviating or pushing off these things like car loans, like student loan debt, I think can go a long way to alleviating that stress. Now, Betsy, you said that you were mostly positive, but that you might have to pay a little bit of the Debbie Downer role. What are some things that you would like to see in future stimuli, stimuluses?
What is the plural? Stimuli, I think you might have had it.
Okay.
So, my number one priority is to let's help that other 25% of the people that weren't eligible for this particular relief. They're hurting the same amount as the people that did get it, and the reason they're not eligible is through no fault of their own. So, I'd really like to see parity between those borrowers and the ones that did get the waiver. I'd also like, what we haven't talked about are private student loans. They also aren't eligible for the waiver. And, on an everyday basis, federal student loans do have options for relief, such as lower payment and deferment, and private loans mostly don't. Some of them do if they're non-bank private loans, but they, they don't have income-based repayment plans. They don't usually have deferment. Sometimes they'll have forbearance, but for a fee. So I would like to see, relief for more retail credit, which would include the private student loans.
Yeah, and that. Do you have any indication that this could be part of the next stimulus bill, or this could be another move that is made? Because it seems to be that we're approaching this methodically, right? I mean, we had the health pandemic, which is obviously the huge issue. Then you had to shut down the economy. Then it's kind of priming the economy, if that's even the right word, by keeping people, you have the small business loans. We have over 30 million small businesses in this country. So do you think that this is something that methodically people will get to for this 25%?
I hope so. I just don't know what it would look like. I mean, for private loans, I don't see them saying, I don't think they can say you have to give them a 0% interest rate. But what I think they could do is some of the regulators, like the OCC, could, issue guidance that said, we know as a rule, you can't really substantially alter the terms of the loan, but under the circumstances, will allow you to offer modifications, very similar to what they did during the mortgage crisis.
Yeah.
So, I think if they mimicked to some extent what they did during the mortgage crisis for private student loans and other types of consumer credit, I think that could provide at least some short-term relief for those particular borrowers.
Yeah, one area, and I know this is not necessarily the area that you're focused on, but I just want to get your maybe reaction to this. I mean, obviously, colleges and universities had to put aside having students on campus, and at least in the short run, I got to think that they're going to take a hit, right? Because they have payments that they need to make, but also students may not come back until the fall. Classes may be suspended. They're doing a lot of e-learning. What do you think the impact, and again, we're in the middle of this, so maybe this isn't a fair question to ask, but what do you think the impact to higher education in general could be, and also to the student loan apparatus going forward? How would this alter those businesses?
Yeah, so you're actually the second person in the last 24 hours to ask me that question. So I think that is something that people, even though we're sort of in the beginning stages of this, and we don't know how long it's going to last or what the long-term impact is going to be, I think it's something people are starting to think about. I think so, and I haven't had the time to do a deep dive on this, but I do know the CARES Act does give some money to colleges and universities to sort of help prop them up. But I don't know the extent of that or any of the details. I do know that the college admissions are watching really closely. I'm starting to see some of them extend deposit deadlines. Usually it's May 1st. I've already seen some extend them to June 1st.
Yeah.
And I think there's some real concern for enrollment, especially schools that end up getting a lot of out-of-state students. I think families, whether for financial or pandemic reasons, are reconsidering whether it's a good idea for the student to attend school out of state as early as September of 2020. And that could absolutely negatively affect the enrollment for schools that do tend to have a lot of on-campus housed students. Now, from a state school or maybe community college perspective, where they do tend to have more commuting students, they might actually see their enrollments go up. But with I don't know what the number is I saw today. Is it 10 million people out of work?
Yep. 10 million can't file for unemployment benefits at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to put a strain on the institutional financial aid funds. There really is it's not. Federal student aid, for the most part, isn't first come, first serve. So if we get an extra 5 million people applying for it, it'll be there. But federal student aid rarely covers the whole bill, and you're going to have more families filing appeals because their income was affected substantially due to the pandemic. And institutional endowments can only handle so much, and the state scholarships and so on. So there'll be people that may have to make different college choices because a school they could afford a month ago, now they can't afford that school.
Yeah, and how would you make, again, a lot of these kids are probably, I would say we're coming to the end of the year, right? They would probably be in schools, at least accepted for the majority of them. But I'm trying to think, like, how would you even do a visit, a college visit? I mean, these are things like I remember when going to college, 25, 30 years ago, and my dad took me around and we went to visit college campuses. You're not going to do that now. So how do you even look at a college campus? You look at the brochure, but how do you get a real feel for what that college or university looks like? You look at it on YouTube, right? I mean, I think this alters not only your line of work, which is the student loan business, but I think this significantly alters, as you're stating, the higher education business as well. And it is a business.
And listen, especially the 2-year private colleges, they were struggling before.
Yep.
So, this could be the end of it. In fact, I had somebody ask me the other day, I wonder how many schools are going to take the stimulus money and then end up closing anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's so many different moving pieces here. And again, we're not trying to elevate a sense of urgency to people. People are really focused on the here and now, and they should be. Stay safe, focus on the economics, deal with your family and all your issues. But I think longer term, there's going to be a lot of changes to so many different businesses just as a result of the working from home, the in-home learning that's taking place with some of these K through 12 schools around the country. There are significant modifications that are going to happen. Betsy, last question for you. You have a service that you kind of counsel, not kind of, you do. You counsel families of students and students in general about this. Can people reach out to you? Are you able to take on additional? I know you're up to the gills in work, but can you counsel people? Can you help people? What do you suggest?
Oh, for sure. So we actually, as a rule, non-pandemic, that's what we do. That's the mission of my organization. Mm-hmm. So anybody can reach out to our website, which is freestudentloanadvice.org, and there's anything you'd ever want to know about the different options available with student loans. And if you have questions, you can email us through the Contact Us page. And it's free to everyone. There's no registration requirement. There's no referrals. So it's completely free. But because of what's going on with the pandemic, we actually also partnered with another awesome nonprofit called Mapping Your Future, as well as another one called Decision Partners. And we created a new website called studentaidpandemic.org, mm-hmm. which is also completely free to everybody. So if you have questions, if you're a college student that was displaced because of the pandemic, or if you're a student loan borrower who's trying to figure out what your options are, that website, again, no registration requirement. We don't collect any information, and it's completely free. There's interactive training modules. There's FAQs. There's other resources, and we update that, multiple times a day. So it's a great place to bookmark as things change, to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date information. And our plan, you brought up something that was a concern of ours from the beginning, which is we don't know what the long-term economic impact is going to be. So what happens when these waivers are over? So our intent is to make sure this site stays up as a resource to help people sort of through the effects of the pandemic as long as necessary.
Yeah. Well, look, Betsy, keep up the good work. We appreciate you coming on the program, and we'll look to have you on the network, on the television network, in the coming week or so you can advise those listeners in the audience there, get your perspective, and maybe things will have changed in a week, or they probably will, right? I mean, this is
absolutely.
It's an ebb and a flow. It's an ebb and a flow.
Yeah.
But we really appreciate you coming on and
it was my pleasure.
helping us, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back. Now time to shift gears, talk a little markets, and there's nothing going on in markets, right, guys? Joining me on the line, he is the co-founder of Delphi Digital, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Doing well, Jeff, considering. How about yourself?
Doing okay. How's the team?
Team's good. Team's healthy and self-quarantined for weeks now, so far so good, but going a little stir-crazy.
Yeah, I think people are going to be climbing the walls, or if they aren't already, are going to be climbing the walls, because here in the New York area, and I know you're in the New York and Brooklyn area, we can't leave. I mean, we're literally We're
It's
literally
full-blown
stuck.
lockdown.
Yeah, it absolutely stinks. So Kevin, I want to jump right into it. I mean, obviously jobless claims went up. We've got 10 million people in this country that have filed for unemployment benefits, and unemployment went up to 4.4%. But I want to get, I don't want to just focus on these numbers because I think that people take that stuff out of context. Let's give them some context about what happened during the week, maybe some of the impact of the stimulus, what you've seen in the markets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, I mean, just leading off with the initial jobless claims number, and I agree. I don't think we want to put too much emphasis on these numbers. That's not to say that they aren't significant. And again, 6.5, more than 6.5 million people filing initial claims this week, or really actually technically the week that ended last week. I mean, certainly extremely significant, and a lot of economists, it topped a lot of economists' estimates, and also was a number that no one ever really wanted to see, right? Because obviously that means there is a ton of disruption going on in the labor market. But yeah, I mean, the payrolls number this morning, you had about 700,000 job losses, I guess you could say. And I think the median economist estimate was around 100,000. So what you're basically starting to see, kind of zooming out, is this is certainly having a very quick, rapid influence on the kind of current state or health of the labor market, and as such, the health of the global economy, right? And if you think about where the U.S. sits, has the largest and I guess you could say most affluent consumer base, in the world. If you have 6.5 million people and 10 million over the last 2 weeks filing on initial jobless claims, filing for unemployment, that certainly is a huge dent to global growth and global consumption, right? And again, the U.S. kind of sits at the center of that. And we've talked, previously about how the U.S. consumer for probably the last couple of years has really kind of served as the backbone for the global economy. And if you saw the consumer go, so too would go the global economy. And we're really starting to see that play out now. I mean, in terms of the stimulus that you were alluding to, there's been a lot of back and forth in terms of additional stimulus. I think we're going to need additional fiscal stimulus because you're already seeing, for example, in the small business lending programs, there's still a lot of things that need to be fleshed out. They're supposed to go live today, but even on the SBA loan side, you're seeing a lot of holdups or delays from some of these major banks that are trying to implement these systems and try and get them up and running, and are still looking for additional clarity from lawmakers and policymakers. So to say that we're anywhere close to getting out of this, I think is far, far too early. And you're seeing that reflected, in a lot of the numbers that we've seen this week.
And I know that, I mean, there have been firms like Goldman Sachs that have been talking about what the contraction in the GDP could be. And again, my opinion is, I mean, everyone's got an opinion and everyone speculates. Probably not really good to speculate, but clearly there's contraction. This virus has expanded to over 151 countries, most of which are probably not even as remotely sophisticated as a lot of the big Western countries. So this has an impact that goes everywhere. And, I think obviously there's concern about not only restarting the American economy, which obviously, as you said, is an engine of growth, really important to the world, and we make up, we're the largest. I think China's second. But, there's real concern out there, and I think rightfully so.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those times where it's extremely difficult to figure out in normal conditions what's potentially priced into markets, let alone right now where you have, again, a number of different, I guess you'd say, a wide range of potential policy responses to what's happening right now. So to say that that anybody knows where the market heads next and what's priced in, I think at this point would be a bit naive. So again, not a time to really change up the playbook, but also a time in which it wouldn't be a surprise to see more market volatility.
Yeah, so let's I want to kind of change the lens a little bit. Let's talk about long-term investors, right? Because that people listening to this program, they're either institutional or individual investors saving for their future. They run a pension plan, they run an endowment. So let's take the pension plan, right? They have some liquidity needs in the short run, and theoretically, they have a cash buffer. I've talked to other people in this space that are managing pension plans, and they have a cash buffer that's already in place to pay those payments. But you got to stay true to your convictions. This is something that on the long term we get through, right? Everything, the America is not going to, we're not going to separate into 50 different confederacies. We are still going to be one country. We're going to get through this. But in terms of conviction, you got to have that conviction and mettle based on what you believed before this. in terms of long term.
No, absolutely. And I think, to that point, if you think about, your kind of average 401k person, every 2 weeks, assuming again that, given this job market, a lot of people will be able to either work from home or at least will continue to be employed. If you have every 2 weeks money rolling into your 401k consistently, this again, longer term, to your point, will serve as, in hindsight, a good buying opportunity because you've seen such a drastic drawdown across financial markets, right? So you're basically continuing to kind of dollar cost average in. So that's important to keep in mind. It's again not the time to really switch up the playbook depending on what your current financial situation is. But I think it is a good point because again, we talk about it constantly, but time horizon certainly matters. And if you have money that you've been waiting to put into the markets, or that you don't necessarily need and kind of your emergency funds. I mean, we're hearing a lot of people now start to talk about not necessarily just buying the dip, but starting to allocate into markets again, just because again, it's going to be in hindsight a good buying opportunity long term.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's all in your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
People closer to retirement obviously are very concerned. But I got to tell you, Kevin, when you look at guaranteed income products like annuities, those I've read that annuity providers, just given the fixed income market and the interest rate environment, they've been pulling some of these annuities off. So that's not the perfect solution either. I mean, it just a lot of this just comes down to timing, meaning timing of when you retire, and just the timing of where you are in the market cycle.
No, 100%, 100%. And it kind of leads into, the crypto conversation that I'm sure we're about to get to.
Absolutely. I was headed right there. So
yeah.
why don't you take it in that direction if you want?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one of those things where, a lot of the work that I've been doing specifically recently has been looking at, the argument of the narrative around Bitcoin being, the safe haven store of value, a true macro hedge. And obviously when you see, significant drawdowns in something like Bitcoin, there's a lot of shade that gets thrown on that argument. But I think, it's important to keep in context the broader kind of market turmoil that we've seen that we're talking about right now. And during periods in which you have, real true liquidity crises and pretty much everyone's running for the exits across different asset classes and liquidity really dries up, it's not an environment in which you would actually expect a whole lot of asset classes, if any, to really perform well. I mean, unless you were sitting in, dollars or you were sitting in U.S. treasuries over the last, 4, 5, 6 weeks, you probably came out of Q1, a lot bloodier than when you entered after 2019, right? Mm-hmm. So again, keeping that in perspective, and I think, for Bitcoin, long story short, I think it's too early to call that macro narrative and argument dead, but I think what I think it has done is really shifted up the timeline in which Bitcoin has to prove, its worth or what it was designed or built to do, right? Because you have so much of this monetary and fiscal stimulus. You could argue over the last, you just basically pulled forward an entire decade of stimulus up into, the last few weeks. Really over the next 18, 24, maybe 36 months, that's kind of the time horizon we're looking at to see, if Bitcoin's ever going to outperform and really get onto the main stage, it's going to be in an environment like this because the macro backdrop has arguably never been better. And what I mean by that is obviously it's a very terrible situation that's going on, and it's not something that we would want to harp on or have continue just to prove the narrative. But if you're thinking about, again, non-correlated, potentially asymmetric return asset in this environment for the long-term saver, I think Bitcoin certainly deserves at least a second look here.
And I mean, from what I've read over the last few days, and I obviously through aggregating the news, I take a look at a lot of different things, but I have seen talk about central banks now really continuing to invest or explore heavily digital currency. And I wonder if this speeds it up. I mean, as they're looking to, interest rates are zero, basically, right around the globe. And I wonder if this is another avenue that they can explore in terms of levering and not levering up, but like pulling different levers in order to deal with crises like these.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting use cases for that, to your point, is if you think about the transmission mechanism from getting, big fiscal stimulus packages approved, and then that transmission mechanism to the actual end user of that funding, right? And this is where you get into helicopter money and actually having money put into the pockets of, your average consumer and the average person out there. I think something like a central bank digital currency makes a whole lot of sense because it makes that entire process much more efficient, right? Mm-hmm. I mentioned at the top of this talk,
Kevin? Oh, go ahead. I lost you for a second. Go ahead. Finish your
No,
thought.
yeah, I mentioned small businesses and everything that's happening there, and just again that transmission mechanism going through the banking sector.
Hmm.
And again, there's some argument to be made there for banks actually being the ones to run this process. But in a situation like this where times are extremely dire and conditions are worsening literally by the hour, I think something like central bank digital currency and being able to drop money into people's pockets, pretty much on a whim, certainly that argument certainly gets bolstered in a condition like this.
1 minute left. Are you seeing during these times? Does Bitcoin create more Bitcoin? Right, because we've talked about this typically is a process that happens over time. There's a finite amount. It's almost like a gold, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
finite amount of Bitcoin. But do they mine more? I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but would they mine more during this time? Like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple. I'm using Bitcoin generically.
Yeah, so it's what's beautiful. It's a really good question actually, and what's beautiful about the Bitcoin blockchain is that the way in which it operates, it has a finite supply, it has a very predictable supply schedule, and you can't mine more Bitcoin even if you wanted to, right? So you can have more people coming in to try and mine it, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of kind of game theory and economics around profit margins and things of that nature. But when it comes to the amount of actual Bitcoin that gets that is increase in supply over this week, next year, that's on a preset schedule, right? So it doesn't matter how much demand there is for
Hmm.
mining Bitcoin, the amount of which is not going to change.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us on the program today. You guys stay safe, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jeff.
bud. Bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to talk real estate. A lot going on in the space, and who better to talk to real estate about than Jacob Hassey? He is the real estate reporter for Dow Jones Market Watch. Jacob, welcome back to the program. How are you?
I'm doing well as I can, given all this. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. You're right. I think but you really are right in the epicenter of this pandemic, at least in the New York area, and I'm just right outside. So I think we're just holding our breath and trying to do what we can to
Yes.
alleviate the spread of this horrible virus.
Yeah, no, not going outside, staying inside, doing my best to stay healthy amid all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so glad you could set aside a little time for us on the program. And I have to imagine that, we last chatted, I think we were a week into the quarantine, but we anticipated some disruption to what was shaping up to be a pretty nice spring. Spring is the typical time that people begin to sell houses, buy houses. Based on your reporting, what's going on in the real estate world? I got to think that things are kind of still locked up, but I want to get your perspective
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, so we're starting to get the first kind of bits of data that are indicating a slowdown in the housing market. So Realtor.com put out a report looking at sales data for the month of March, and while the month of March was actually relatively strong because the first half of the month was still more or less business as usual for most of the country. It's really in the second half of the month we're starting to see things slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So notably the pace of home price growth slowed. According to Realtor.com, home list prices were only up 3% year over year for the week ending March 21st, and
Mm-hmm.
then 2.5% year over year for the week ending March 28th. So these are the last 2 weeks of March. And that was the slowest, slowest pace of home price appreciation that Realtor.com has recorded since it began tracking this data back in 2013. Also, the number of newly listed properties fell by 34% in the last week of March
Mm-hmm.
when compared with the last week of March in 2019. And this is normally the time of year where you would see more homes coming
Yep.
onto the market, a jump in homes, not, and this data is seasonally adjusted, but still you would, given the low interest rate environment and things like that we came into the year with, you would expect, and you and I talked earlier this year about, how the spring home buying season was getting an earlier start than usual because of how conditions were so favorable for buyers. But leaving aside the fact that, there were, not that many homes on the market because of the building shortage and things like that. So, the fact that we're now seeing the number of listed properties drop compared to last year, that's not an indication that people are scooping up properties quickly. That's more an indication that that sellers are not putting their homes on the market. And we're going to probably see more of that. I mean, that's that's kind of the first thing you're going to start seeing is sellers are going to just refrain from listing their homes if they can. Obviously, there's an extent to which you might need to sell your home if you need to move for work or something like that. But this is kind of where that's where we'll start to see some movement. Another report came out also from Lending Tree, and they looked at search data. So they looked at the search term "homes for sale" on Google and saw how it was trending. And it was they looked at how it was trending in the 50 largest cities across the country, and in every one of those cities, the search volume for the phrase "homes for sale" has dropped over the last few months. So, so based on their calculations, they expect that home searches could drop some 63% compared with last year.
Wow.
If the coronavirus outbreak remains substantial for the next few months. A drop in home searches online would probably, lead to a drop in, home sales in the real world. So, we're starting to see these issues flare up.
We just had the CARES package, stimulus package passed. Was there anything in there, it was the third in a succession of stimulus packages or stimuli packages. I'm still trying to figure out how to pronounce that. But was there anything in the packages for real estate investors, real estate sellers, brokers, etc.?
Yeah. So the CARES Act did have certain things that related to real estate. Largely, it related to forbearance and evictions, so foreclosure relief and evictions. So it kind of made, it put into law some of the forbearance arrangements that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development had put out guidance in recent weeks, calling on mortgage servicers to offer forbearance to their borrowers who are encountering financial hardship as a result of the coronavirus situation. And a lot of different groups across the country have also put a halt on evictions. So in the CARES Act, there was a restriction on evictions for renters who live in multifamily buildings that where the landlord has a mortgage that is backed by the federal government. So if your landlord has a mortgage from HUD that's backed by HUD or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, you cannot be evicted for the next 120-day period, which is good. We don't want people to lose their homes during this crisis. Doesn't do a whole lot for for folks financially. I mean, the stimulus checks are going to be a huge help, but the big story this week was rent was due for most people on April 1st, and certainly no one's really received their stimulus check yet. And if you had been laid off throughout the month of March or furloughed, as many people were, millions of people were, there's a significant chance you were not able to pay your rent this month if you didn't have any money in savings, which is the case for a lot of folks, especially folks in the service industry and in restaurants and some of these industries that were more acutely affected by this crisis. So those folks, you're not going to be evicted, but if you don't pay your rent and that's reported to credit bureaus, that can hurt your credit score. Also, depending on how you work it out with your landlord, it can be you might still be facing some fees, late payment fees or missed payment fees, things like that, which can make the financial impact of all this all the more difficult. And for landlords, it's really difficult. I did a story about how small landlords are going to be really hard hit by this. A lot of landlords, especially folks who own like single family homes that they rent out, a lot of those folks don't have a ton in savings, and the rent that they charge their tenants is really, going to pay off the mortgage, and they're not really taking a huge cut of proceeds. In a lot of cases, the person who's renting out the home views it as more of an investment property than a money making opportunity. So the problem is for these landlords, if they let's say you have a duplex and both sets of tenants are not paying the rent this month, and then you can't pay the mortgage. If your lender doesn't offer you forbearance, you could easily become delinquent on your mortgage as a landlord. And then if you're foreclosed against as a landlord, not only do you lose the property, but then the tenants will be evicted from the property. So, this whole situation with rent could, have a really horrible snowball effect throughout the economy and displace lots of people. It's a huge problem that a lot of folks are facing right now.
Yeah, this is really, and this is where I think the rubber meets the road. We've got this stimulus package. I think people are really setting aside some of these longer term, and I say longer term, Jacob. I almost called you Kevin, but I really meant Jacob. I really think people are setting aside these longer term commitments, and I mean month to month, for these shorter term commitments. How am I going to make my rent? How am I going to pay my bills? And I think this has really kind of broken down the workflow. And, I think people are just living day to day. And I think things like real estate and home buying and investing and all these things get put aside. And I suspect we're going to see this impact not only this quarter, which you're already seeing, as you stated, but also into second, third, and fourth quarter.
Yeah, no, I think some of these things, if you're, months behind on rent, things like that, it'll be difficult. And then in the mortgage market, there's a huge upheaval going on right now. I mean, when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, there's estimates that as many as 700,000 mortgage borrowers across the country are going to be requesting forbearance and need forbearance. But for the lenders and servicers, they still, if they securitize those loans, they still have to pay off their investors. And already you're seeing a lot of mortgage companies raising the red flag of, we don't have the funds to, pay our investors. And you see also mortgage companies have taken, when they offer loans, they take hedges, and the rate environment's been really volatile these last few weeks. So a lot of companies have lost a lot of money on these hedges that they make against interest rates. So basically, like in the mortgage market, you're seeing the Mortgage Bankers Association, making these fairly, serious calls for, more liquidity and things like that being extended to lenders, because you could see lenders put out of business. And then, if more, lenders or servicers are put out of business as a result of this, if the federal government doesn't step in and offer them assistance, then, that, causes the mortgage market to kind of unravel, and it'll be harder to get a loan. So if you want to refinance or you want to buy a home or anything like that, it'll become much harder to do so.
Yeah, we just have a couple minutes left, and is this phase of 2008 on top of the economic contraction? We have as of the time we're recording this, about 10 million people filing for unemployment. So unemployment rate has gone up to 4.4%. Is this another challenge that we could be seeing if some kind of stimulus isn't provided to support the market? I mean, could we get into the same issue we had in 2008 on top of everything?
Yeah, so the jury's still out on that. There is definitely concerns that we will see somewhat of a repeat of the foreclosure crisis. Like you just said, I mean, this is kind of an unprecedented level of people being unemployed. And so, the director of the FHFA, which is the regulator that regulates Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Mark Calabria, he gave an interview with CNBC this week where he kind of said that where we should look to see if there's going to be really big issues in the mortgage market is the market for FHA loans, so Federal Housing Administration backed loans. Those loans are more targeted to first-time home buyers. They usually require lower credit scores, lower requirements in terms of down payment, things like that. So those borrowers are the riskier borrowers, and he basically was making the argument this week that if we're going to see a foreclosure crisis as a result of this, you should look to see if mortgage-backed securities of FHA loans sold by Ginnie Mae start to fail. That's where we'll kind of start to see that picture emerge. He kind of said that if everything is resolved in the, or not maybe resolved, but if things improve in the next 2 to 3 months in the economy, then we're probably not going to see, a major foreclosure crisis again. But he argued that if this lasts, if the economic downturn caused by all this lasts for 6 months or so, then we will start to see, a pretty large wave of foreclosures. The good news for a lot of folks is, unlike the last crisis in 2008, that was fueled in large part because people were cashing out so much money from their homes. And so when home prices dropped, they quickly fell underwater on their homes, which made it hard to sell.
Right.
So you couldn't sell your home if you were encountering financial difficulties. The good news this time around is most people are in a pretty strong position with equity. There has been cash out refinance activity still, but it's been much more constrained compared to what we were seeing before the 2008 crisis. So folks who are hitting hard times might be able to sell their homes before they, get into a situation where they're in foreclosure. And we're also not seeing a lot of the speculative building that we saw pre-2008. So, you and I have talked about how building activity has actually been quite suppressed in recent years.
Yep.
So, you're not seeing like you saw in Florida or, Nevada or Arizona, those massive gated communities that were sitting vacant, waiting for someone to buy a home, and then the foreclosure crisis happened in 2008. That's not going to happen this time around. So there are certain factors in the housing market that will keep it relatively strong, and that should hopefully support, consumers. If you have lost your job and can't afford your monthly mortgage payment, you might be able to, sell your home and cash out some of that money and have, a nest egg to sit on. So that you're, in a more secure financial position, things like that. So hopefully we won't see a repeat, but the possibility is there to some extent.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much for your analysis and detail there. I think it's important for people to hear about this and to realize the possibilities. And stay safe, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yes, talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome back. Now it's time to talk about retirement. And joining me on the line is Miss Alessandra Melito. She's a retirement reporter, the retirement reporter, I should say, for Dow Jones Market Watch. Hi, Allie. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. We had a little scare this week with our cat Sebastian, but he appears to be just fine. And we're sitting here. My wife's in the other room. We're doing the best we can.
Good. I'm glad Sebastian is doing well.
Yeah, I am too, because I love the little guy. Okay, so let's jump right into it. A lot of talk this week about stimulus checks, but I think a lot of questions around Social Security payments came up during the week. What can you tell us there? I know you've done a lot of research, done a lot of writing on this.
Yeah, so the stimulus had a lot of provisions that also impact and affect retirement savers and retirees. But one of the ones that everybody was most interested in, it seemed like this week, was about the rebate checks.
Yep.
And a lot of people had asked, like, what if I claim Social Security benefits? What if I'm on disability? Am I eligible? Do I count? All that stuff. At the moment that the Treasury Department is trying to sort through, and the IRS is letting people know, but do claim Social Security, you are eligible for the rebate check. It's up to $1,200 if you make $75,000 or less, or if you are married filing jointly, that would be $150,000 or less, and you get $2,400. So let's see. What was actually really interesting this week, originally last week when the law was signed, people were trying to figure out, well, how exactly will the government know I exist, and how will the government send me money? And experts were saying, well, if you claim Social Security and you don't file a tax return because you're not required to, it can use the Social Security forms, the 1099 that the administration sends out to recipients. Then on Monday, the IRS issued guidance saying that everybody who's eligible will need to file a tax return, and that includes people who normally don't file a tax return.
Right.
So a lot of low-income individuals and Social Security recipients. And critics went like wild. They were like, this is wrong. So many people are going to miss out. And they referenced 2008 when there were the stimulus checks in 2008. I think it was like 3.5 million people missed out, even though they were eligible, because people who don't normally file tax returns, they might be confused, they might need help. This time especially, it's not like you can go out to an accountant and be like, hey, can you help me with this? Nobody's allowed to leave the house. So it could become a very stressful, complicated situation for somebody who's not used to it. So then on Wednesday, the IRS reversed their guidance and said,
Allie?
I don't have to do anything different.
Say that one more time because I lost you. You cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. So the IRS reversed its decision, and now if you get the benefit of the rebate check.
It seems to me, Allie, that kind of thinking this through, I mean, why would you require people who are getting Social Security? You already know who those people are, right? You're paying out Social Security checks to either beneficiaries or to retirees. You would have that pool. You would already know who they are. So you could take that population and marry it with the IRS data that you have and put it all together, and you would know who your population was. I mean, it's just, as a data guy, as a reformed record keeper, that just seems like it makes sense to me, but maybe it's more difficult than I maybe understand.
Yeah, honestly.
What's that, Al? I'm sorry. You broke up a little bit.
Sorry, I don't know why that's...
That's okay.
Can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you just fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So, honestly, if they had kept the original plan, like they did on Monday, where they were going to require everybody to file tax returns, it would have been more complicated even for the IRS. A lot of some of the people that I was talking to, they said, well, think of all the calls that are going to be coming in and all the questions that they're going to be fielding. It'd be a lot. I'm sure that they're already inundated with calls and questions and emails and things like that. So this makes it a little simpler, although low-income workers, those who don't, who don't normally have to file if they're not Social Security recipients, they would. So the IRS reversed its decision that it had on Monday, saying that everybody had to file a tax return, including Social Security beneficiaries.
Yep.
And that is definitely a good idea, according to a lot of the experts that I spoke with, because it just would have caused mass chaos. There are millions of people who claim Social Security and don't file a tax return, and this decision would have left a lot of them maybe missing out on those checks.
Mm-hmm.
Also it would have been hard for them, like for the agency. Some people that I spoke to said that even think of all the calls that the IRS is going to get, and they're obviously not going to be able to answer each and every person. So it would have been difficult. I mean, when I wrote those articles originally, I had gotten so many emails from readers who were asking about their specific situations, like if they claimed disability benefits or if they claimed SSI or if they lived abroad and claimed Social Security. So I can only imagine that the agency would be inundated with calls and emails and texts and, wherever else. So it turned out this seems to be a good idea. The problem is there's still a lot of unknowns.
Yep.
There are special circumstances and unique situations. We don't really have the answers for those right now.
Yep.
Hopefully the Treasury Department does issue more guidance in the coming days. I think they did something even, it was like midnight for small businesses. They issued more guidance for that. But there is still a lot unknown.
Yeah, I think what's important here is everyone needs to understand they're going to get their Social Security check, and they will get their stimulus check, and then kind of recalibrate your expectations, because a lot of people, Allie, are going to the websites. The websites are not able to support all the traffic. I mean, I was looking earlier at the SBA website. It was not letting me do certain things. I think that's important. So in due time, things will find their way to people. But in no way are they having current benefits disrupted, and that's really, really important to understand. And I give my hats off to all these people at the IRS, the Department of Treasury, the executive branch, all these people that are working really hard. There are so many unknowns. No one's ever dealt with this before, and I'm not making excuses. This is just a reality. I mean, if you think it's going to go perfect, you're living in la la land. So I think there's a lot of work, a lot of hard work that's been done. I watch the press conferences every day, as I think I've mentioned to you in the past, and I've mentioned on the show, and it's amazing what we're able to do at the state, local, and federal level to meet the needs of people. And I think we're just touching the surface here. So I just would urge people who are listening to just recognize that, reset their expectations, and also read Ali Melito's articles, because she's got her nose to the grindstone, right, Al?
Thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm trying.
Well, Allie, thank you so much. Stay safe, drink your coffee, and we will look forward to speaking with you very soon.
Great. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. I want to thank you very much for stopping by and listening. Of course, I want to thank all of our contributors as well for making time during these difficult times with their busy schedules to join us and analyze all the news. Don't forget, we're back again tomorrow morning for another episode of BRN AM. You're not going to want to miss it. We have Sue Walton from Capital Group on talking about target date funds. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.